Hello everyone. I'd like to do a video demo on creating a table tent in InDesign, and just to show you a few options. I also want to make note that I place a lot of files that may come in handy for you. So if you go to the course information tab in your portal and click on student files, you'll note that I placed a lot of files in here that are essentially food items. This is from a client I used to work for many years ago. It was a food client for restaurants. And if you'll note here, these are just a few samples. Well, actually, these are interiors, but I've got a lot of high-end food samples that also include clipping paths for you. These are files that I had. I just was able to. So if you open up these files, they're Photoshop documents. They're rather large files. But if you note that the paths are all included in here. Okay, so that makes things quite simple for you. So everything is cut out with the exception of the shadow, which you can easily create in InDesign. These are ideal for, you've got a lot of choice selections in here to choose from, so this will cut down on your research and give you some nice quality images that have already been retouched by me. You could see the original image here, and I simply, cut them out, and these were taken with by a photographer, and I just retouched them, and you have some good end results to choose from there. So I'm also going to be including some other images I got. I got this image from Google. I'm actually going to be using this image. I also got this from Google. So I'm going to jump over to InDesign and start fresh. So if I create a new file, new document, and again, I like to work with the blank canvas unless I need to do another option here. So I'm going to uncheck facing pages, and I'm going to create my size here. So when it comes to the table tent and designing for your menu and brochure, you want to really think of the design aspect of this. So I strongly suggest that you sketch out each, and what you want to look for are some common visual elements to place in each. That could be anything from a tablecloth, which I'm going to be using. You have to decide for yourself. The design aspect is up to you, and I'll show you how and what I did. I'm going to be creating a table tent size that will be 6 by 6 inch square. The size is up to you. There's no specifications as to what size you need to work with. So I'm going to be creating a 6 by 6 inch document, but I'm going to do some math here, and I'm going to create a table tent that will connect at the bottom to create an actual tent. So I'm going to create 6 by 6, and then there's a back. So if you calculate the height, it will be 12 inches, and then plus another 2 inches on the top and bottom for tucking underneath when you fold the tent. So I've got a 6-inch wide document, and I'm going to have, let's see, 6, 12, 13, 16-inch document that in height. I'm just going to remove the gutter here, and I'm going to also remove the margins. However, for bleed, the bleed will be 1/8 of an inch, so I'm going to have 0.125 inches for the bleed. So let me copy that, and I'm going to place that in the bleed cell right here, and then hit tab, and that will populate all of these cells here. And then everything looks good, and I will hit OK. So now I'll set up my guidelines. So I have a 6-inch wide document with my red bleed line around the outer edges. So it'll be 6 inches square for the front and back, and then 2 inches on the top and bottom for the folding aspect of this. So I've got a total of 16 inches, so I'm going to put a guideline down at the 8-inch mark. That will be the folding area, the folding line. And then I will come down 2 inches and 2 inches from the bottom, which will look like that. I'll change, just to double check, I will change my ruler origins to be 0 in the center by clicking on where these rulers meet in the corner, clicking and dragging down here, and now this becomes 0, so I can see here that everything looks good, and I'm ready to proceed. So the first thing I'm going to do is note that I have in Illustrator, I have a variety of logos here that was provided. So this is the town logo here, and I also have it set up where everything's in white. Let's start out with going back to InDesign, and what I'm going to do is create a text box, a picture box here, and I will click and drag here, and I'm going to place an image that looks like this. I'm actually going to start fresh and do a search for a wood grain. So I'll just paste wood grain in here, do a search for that, go to images, and a high resolution image to place in there. So under search tools, I'm going to select a larger than option, and I'll go with 2 megapixels. This is a very large one, so I'll select this one. Okay, I'll click on view image, and then right click on that and save this as a wood grain. Okay, and I'll hit save. Alright, so back in InDesign, I'm actually going to place that file into this entire area here and see how that works out. So file, place, and go to my wood grain, and that would be here, and there we go. So that kind of goes in there, and that looks pretty good. So just to hide the ends of this, I'll bring it here. So notice that I'm bringing it to the bleed area. Okay, so I want this to trim the inside line here, so this edging or bleed area will be considered waste. All right, this upper area here and the lower area here will be the folding area where the table tent will kind of connect together underneath. All right, so I've got my image there, and I'm going to go to my layers panel, lock this, create a new layer, and then bring in another element here. So I'm going to work with this tablecloth. Okay, so I've already cut this out. There's other ways to do that, but basically I want to be able to cut this out and just use this tablecloth to place on top of that wood. So back in InDesign, I'm going to create a, well, let me just place it. I will place that in here, just position this over here. All right, and now what I'll do is, wait a second, object, clipping path, options, and select Photoshop path, and hit OK. Okay, so there we go. So if we look at that file in Photoshop, you'll note that I had that path already created. Okay, so that's how that came about. So now what I'm going to do is I want to, let me just actually move this over. I want this to kind of be the edge that it runs along. And I kind of like this idea because as a viewer looks at this, you know, psychologically the hand is going out and touching the cloth if they decide to pick it up, although a table tent is not meant for that. What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to duplicate this. So I'm going to go to my selection tool, and as I'm dragging, I'm holding down Shift and Alt. Okay, so the Shift key constrains it and the Alt key duplicates it. So now what I'm going to do is, let me just bring this in here again. All right, so I want these to kind of match, so I'm going to flip this. So if I note that the center point is centered here as opposed to here, so I'm going to keep it centered, and I'm going to right click and go to transform, flip vertical. All right. So it matches up nicely. Actually looks a little fake, but you get the idea. All right, so the next step is this. I'm going to bring in a food element. So that food element will be, where is this? I like this here. So again, note I've already created my path around it. You know, you need to have a little bit of Photoshop knowledge to be able to work with the pen tool, or Illustrator knowledge. If you know how to work with the pen tool, you can essentially outline these elements using your pen tool. And there's other ways too. You could use the Content Aware feature and select all of these elements here and then create a clipping path out of that selection, or a work path. Okay, so actually let me just show you that. So if I go to my quick selection tool and click and start dragging, it's a really quick way, as long as you have contrast, it's a quick way of selecting an element here. You know, you just have to make sure that you have all these elements in here. So one quick way to see and make sure that you have everything is to work with Quick Mask. So to show you what I mean, again, this is supposed to be a course on InDesign, but it also involves, you know, working with the other applications. So just to give you a heads up here, so if I hit the letter Q this is showing you in red what I just selected. Okay, so it's a good way of seeing what you want to select. So what you can do really is go in there and actually use the painting tools to fill in this area. You're essentially editing a selection by doing this. Okay, so if I hit Q again, I'll exit that, and then I can go back in and continue to click on where I want. Okay, and then when I'm ready, when I have a good selection around here, I'm going to go to upper right hand corner and select Make Work Path, hit OK, and then double click on that and hit OK again to save that path, and there you go. Okay, so that's how that was done. So back in InDesign, okay, I'm going to I know I want to bring it down to this area here, so I'm going to click on the bottom area here and go to File, Place, and place my image, which is, and here it is here, and it's about the right size. Actually, let me just scale this up a little bit, and then I need to object clipping path. Whoops. Object. Notice I did not have it selected correctly. Clipping path options, and then select Photoshop path, and there we go. All right, so I will move this down here, and there we go. So now I want to bring in my logo, so I'm going to go to File, Place, and look for the logo that is already done in Illustrator, as I noted before, and it's all filled with white. So I'll double click on that to place that. So I fit the content to the frame. I'm happy with the size. Now I need to add something else. So I'm going to make this an appetizer table tent. So I'm going to go to my text tool and create a little text box here. Type in appetizers and highlight that. And let me just first scale this up so I can see it. I'll choose a brush script and scale this up more. So I'm going to double click on the type and go up here and make the font white. Zoom in. I use spacebar control or spacebar command if you're in the Mac environment. And all right. So now what I'll do is I'll select both, and I'll create a little effect here for a drop shadow to make this more easily readable. So Object, Effects, and Drop Shadow. And if I leave this preview checked, I now have a drop shadow that makes this more easy to read. And I'm also going to create a drop shadow for the image here. So Object, Effects, Drop Shadow. All right, and I'll accept the default, hit OK, and there we go. All right, so now I am going to also, let's also create a drop shadow for the tablecloths. Object, Effects, Drop Shadow. All right, so you can't see the drop shadow because of the angle, so I'll change the angle so this way it's coming in from the, so it's 50 degrees, and I did not have both selected, so I'll hit OK, go back down here, and what I'm going to do is make it easy for myself to select this by shift clicking, and I can lock these by hitting Control or Command L, so that locks them. Now I can easily select that. And I will go to Object, Effects, Drop Shadow, and I'll make it the same 50 degrees, and hit OK. All right, so now we have that. Okay, so the next step is to create the actual menu, which I'll put on the back side of this menu, and of course I'll have to flip that upside down. So what I'm going to do is create a shape that, first of all, I'm going to create a shape here. Actually, let me create a new layer. I usually like to have things on their own layers, but I've forgot to do that. So I'm going to create a rule here. I like rules. All right, so I'm just gonna create a rule that kind of looks something like this here. And I'm going to make it white. So let me double click on this stroke with the background and make that white. I'll hit OK. And what I'm going to do is give this kind of a different look. So let me go up to 3 points and I'll select a thick, thin border for it. All right, and I may have to go to 5 points. Okay, so we have something that looks like that. And I can also lessen the transparency to make it a little subtle. So that looks pretty good for now. And note that it's coming above the tablecloth. So what I can do is this. Let me create a new layer. And I'm going to select the tablecloths and drag this red little box here up to the upper layer. All right, so this will place just the tablecloths on its own layer and above these rules. So it kind of has a nice look now. All right, so I will do the same thing. I'll create another layer and create a box that will kind of be centered within that border. All right, and I'm going to fill that with white because I want to have text in there that's readable. So let's make it white. And then what I'll do is I'll create an effect for that. And that will be, if you click on this button right here, the gradient feather tool, I'm sorry, double click. And what this shows is a gradient. So, okay, so let me just try to hide this here. So let me change the angle of that, okay? And it's working with this gradient, these gradient stops here. So I'm going to take this black one, drag it to the middle. Whoops, let me do this. Let me just click at the center. I'm going to add a stopper. So I'm clicking here. All right. And I can transpose these. All right. So I have black in the center, which essentially represents the white on the gradient. But I can also click and drag and customize this gradient by clicking these little diamonds at the top and dragging them to the left and right. And this way I kind of have this gradual gradient. You can always only go to like within 13% of either end. So it kind of looks like that. So I will hit OK. And I can also expand this out if I wish to look like that. I'll move it down. Okay, so then what I'll do is I just want to create something that has some a look of transparency here. So let's see here. Let me lock that and lock everything else. Select that, and I will reduce the opacity of that. So I have something that looks like that. All right, so let's lock that, and I'll now create another new layer. And then this will be where my text will go. So I'll create a text box, click and drag down, and I'm going to actually create a table out of this. All right, I'm going to have, this will be my menu. So I'll have 8 rows of text and 2 columns. All right, so I'll hit OK. I will drag this down to the bottom. A second, let me drag this down to the bottom. Then select all, and then go to distribute rows evenly. All right. I will select the top one, right click and merge that, and then I'll put in my text. All right, so I have it copied on the side here, so I have appetizers, so I'll copy and paste. All right, and I have assorted names here, copy and paste. And okay, so I put in the same price for each one, so I'm just going to select all these and make these aligned right. All right, these are all aligned left, but I'm also going to make these, I'm going to change the font all at the same time. So I'll, I don't know, a brush script. Okay, and I'll change the point size. That's fine, 18, and then I'll make appetizers. Also, I will center that and make this also brush script, and I will make that very large. Alright, so we have that. What I need to do also is remove the stroke, because by default there is a thin black 1-point stroke around this, so I will select all these, right click, go to cell options and strokes and fills, and simply make this no stroke and hit OK. So we have that. Alright, if I hit W, I'll hide all my rules and guides, and we have that so far. So what I like to see is a dotted line in here. So what we can do is this. I'll go to the line tool and click and drag, and as I'm dragging, I'm holding down shift so I have a perfectly horizontal line. Letting go. By default it comes in as a 1-point thick rule. I will change that to let's see, 2 points, but then from this drop down menu here I'll select Japanese dots, let's say. Okay, and then we click away, and there we go. And now it's simply a matter of copying. If I click and start dragging, I'm going to hold down Shift and Option or Alt, and then let go with my cursor first. I want it to be a perfectly vertical slide so that this lines up here. So what I'll do now is click and drag this over to the right, and now we have that. I'll take the top one and slide down and Shift and Alt, and then size that. Okay. All right, so there we go. So we have that. That looks pretty good. I may want to take this background here, and that's the white area, this layer here. I should have named these layers. If I select that, I note that I have it 74%. I want to make this a little more readable. There, that makes it very readable. All right, so since this is going to be flipped, okay, we need to select all this and flip it. So all I need to do is, on layer 6, where all of the text is, including all the dotted lines, I'm going to select everything by clicking on this little box here, and then make sure that the reference point is centered. All right, if it was up in any corner, it would be jump out of position here. So I'm going to simply go to Object, Transform, and Flip Vertical. But then I need to see, now it's backwards, it's mirrored. So Object, Transform, Flip Horizontal. There we go. So now it's readable when it's upside down. All right, again, another long video here, so I apologize for that, but I hope that helped. Take care, guys. Bye.